Hello children, welcome back to the world of national income. By now, you are aware of the basic concepts used in the calculation of national income accounting. Since we are already done with the two methods, that is income method of calculation of national income and the value added. So, today we begin with the third method, that is the expenditure method. Let's go down the memory lane and recapitulate what we had learned in the initial class, especially in the circular flow of national income. We know that national income can be viewed from three different angles. That is, there are three angles of looking at national income. The value added angle, income distribution method, that is the income method, and now we are dealing with the expenditure method. In the production method or the value added method, income is generated in the production unit by adding value, so value addition takes place. In phase 2 of the circular flow, there is distribution of income. The income which is generated by value addition is converted to factor income and paid to the owners of factors of production in the form of wages, rent, interest and profit. So, where does this income go? This query is attended by expenditure method. The money so earned by the factors of production are spent on the purchase of final goods and services. This is phase 3. There is expenditure of income as a consequence of the generation of income in phase 2. This expenditure may be in the form of households who buy the final goods, so leads to consumption expenditure, while the producers who buy the final goods, which is the investment expenditure. As you can see, after the expenditure, the flow comes back to the first phase, as this expenditure generates demand for goods and services in the economy, which again leads to production of goods and services, value addition takes place and distribution of income. And again, the income is used for consumption and investment. That is expenditure, and the circular flow goes on. It's a never-ending process. Let's focus down on expenditure method. Children, expenditure method measures final expenditure. All the expenditure incurred is broadly classified as consumption and investment. Now, the question that may arise in your mind is, how can we measure the expenditure incurred by the entire population in the economy? How difficult. So children, the economists have classified the consumption and investment expenditure incurred by all under the three sectors, that is the primary, secondary and tertiary sector. These final expenditure incurred by all the three sectors are categorized under four broad categories. They are, as you can see on screen, it's private final consumption expenditure, government final consumption expenditure, gross domestic capital formation and net export. Children, when we add these expenditure, what we get is the aggregate, that is gross domestic product at market price. Let's take up the first category of expenditure, that is private final consumption expenditure. This category of expenditure measures the market value of goods and services purchased by households and non-profit institutions serving households during an accounting year. It consists of consumer services, consumer non-durable goods, as you can see on the screen, and the consumer durable goods like the refrigerators, television sets, etc. The second category of expenditure is government final consumption expenditure. It is incurred by the general government to satisfy the collective wants of people. It equals to the imputed value of services produced and provided by the general government free to the people. Examples as shown on screen, government provides street lighting, which is provided by the general government to satisfy the collective wants of people. Its imputed value is included. Government spends on health, education, law and order. Again, its value is included under government final consumption expenditure. The third category of expenditure is gross domestic capital formation. This covers the expenditure incurred on acquiring goods for investment by the production units located within the domestic territory. Children, gross domestic capital formation is broadly categorized under two, that is, gross domestic fixed capital formation and change in stock. Let's first see what is covered under the first category of gross domestic fixed capital formation. Children, gross domestic fixed capital formation is again classified under three heads. The first, as you can see on screen, is gross business fixed investment. It is the amount which business units spend on purchase of plants and equipment. It is gross in nature, that is, it is undiminished by consumption of fixed capital. The next is residential construction investment. It is the amount spent on construction of residential house by we, the common household people. And the third category is of public investment. It is again the expenditure incurred by government, say on construction of dams, bridges, roads, schools, hospitals. So it includes capital formation by government. This is again gross in nature, means it is undiminished by depreciation. The second part of gross domestic capital formation is change in stock. This is the difference between closing stock and opening stock of inventory, like raw materials, semi-finished goods and finished goods. Now, why is the change in stock to be included? This is because these represent current output, which is not included in the current year since they are not sold. So the expenditure is not incurred. But here the goods are actually produced, though not sold, and expenditure not incurred. Let's come back to what are we calculating? It's national income. And national income is the value of all goods and services produced within the domestic territory of a country during an accounting year. So, though the goods are not purchased, but they are produced, so it has to be taken into account. These unsold goods are added to the closing stock, but the closing stock also contains unsold output of the previous year in the name of opening stock. Children, opening stock is nothing but the closing stock of the previous year, which is carried forward in the next accounting year. Therefore, by deducting opening stock from the closing stock, we get the unsold output of the current year. And by adding this to the gross domestic fixed capital formation, we get gross domestic capital formation. The fourth category of expenditure is net export. It is the difference between value of exports and value of imports. In short, we include exports but not the imports. To simplify, export refers to expenditure by foreigners on purchase of Indian products, which are actually produced in the domestic territory and hence is required to be added. And import refers to the expenditure by residents on purchase of foreign products. Now remember, these goods which are imported are not produced in the domestic territory, hence are required to be subtracted. So, the difference between the two, which is net export, is to be added to get the correct valuation of domestic income. Now let's have a comprehensive look of the concepts discussed today. We have seen that the expenditure is categorized under four, as you can see on screen. When we add these four categories of expenditure, that is private final consumption expenditure, government final consumption expenditure, gross domestic capital formation and net exports, what we get is gross domestic product at market price. Again, the next question that may arise is, why do we come across an aggregate which is gross domestic product at market price? Why not NDP at factor cost, that is net domestic product at factor cost? Children, let's get into it. Gross because the investment, the capital formation is undiminished by depreciation. So we get gross. It is domestic because we have taken into consideration values of goods and services produced within the domestic territory of India. The aggregate is at market price because we have taken the values of goods and services at which they are purchased from the market. So it is that market price. The indirect tax and subsidies have yet not been considered. So we derive gross domestic product at market price. Children, as you can see on screen, the detailed bifurcation of gross domestic capital formation It's divided into gross domestic fixed capital formation and change in stock. The gross domestic fixed capital formation again can be bifurcated into two, that is net domestic fixed capital formation and depreciation. In case we add net domestic capital formation instead of gross domestic capital formation, we get an aggregate of net domestic product at market price and not gross domestic product at market price. Once we derive gross domestic product at market price, we can now arrive at national income, that is NNP at factor cost, by subtracting depreciation, subtracting net indirect taxes and adding net factor income from abroad. Once you get the concept, you can analyze situations and apply them to get the solution. Children, there are certain precautions to be taken while you analyze and apply. First, expenditure only on final goods and services are required to be included because it causes corresponding flow of goods and services. The intermediate goods are already included in final expenditure, and if intermediate goods and services are included, it will lead to the problem of double counting. The imputed values on own account production, that is production of goods for self-consumption, imputed value of rent of owner-occupied house, free services from the general government, all should be included. We need to ensure that transfer payments of any kind are not included as no productive services is rendered. Similarly, expenditure on financial assets like shares, bonds should not be included because these are mere paper claims which do not lead to corresponding flow of goods and services. Even expenditure on second-hand goods should not be included because they were accounted for in the year they were produced and there is no value addition in the current year. But yes, expenditure on brokerage on shares and bonds is a service being rendered and so should be included. Similarly, expenditure on commission on sale and purchase of second-hand goods is a new service being rendered and so should be included. So children, we are now ready to deal with numericals. So let's take a numerical example, analyze and applying the concept that we have learned. You can see a question flashed on your screen where a set of data is given to you and you need to calculate gross national product at. The question asks us to calculate gross national product at factor cost with a given set of data. We see that the basic components of expenditure are given. It is essential that we go through the question minutely so that we avoid the errors and doing and redoing the same question again and again. Children, after reading the question, the process of thought should begin from the basic 4 components of expenditure method. And the aggregate that you derive that is we get gross domestic product at market price. When we add the 4 basic components, that is private final consumption expenditure, government final consumption expenditure, gross domestic capital formation and net export. In the given question, gross domestic capital formation is not given at one go. The 3 parts of it are given to you. Add them to get gross domestic capital formation. As you can see on screen, we need to add net domestic fixed capital formation, depreciation and change in stock to arrive at gross domestic capital formation. Once you do that, you get your gross domestic product at market price, that is 2,130 crores. Once you derive GDP at market price, now we can come up with GNP at factor cost by adding net factor income from abroad and subtracting net indirect taxes, and thus arrive at gross national product at factor cost, that is 2070 crores. Children, we will come up with many such numericals in our next interaction, which will be conducted shortly. Till then, revise, revise and revise. Get over the concepts and be ready to apply them. Take care of yourself, your parents and especially of grandparents and little children, if any. Goodbye.